Hi there. This is a response to, I don't know your name, but evidence. The first thing that I want to say is that I'm not at all sure how your video will then go on to justify atheism. The second response is how much I very much agreed with the substance of what you are saying. So I'm going to start off perhaps with this idea of how do we know that anything exists, including ourselves. And I think you're right that we know about existence, or we start from a belief that we experience ourselves. Now, I don't quite agree with Descartes when he says, I think, therefore I am. I think I'd be wanting to reframe that by saying, I am aware, therefore I am. And every human being has the capacity to be aware of our thoughts, aware of our feelings, our emotions, our sensations, and also to be aware of the world in which we live through the five senses. So I would want to perhaps disagree with Descartes and take it a step behind thinking to say awareness is in fact the key. Now, your second point is about assumptions. And we all have to make a series of a priori assumptions. And one of those a priori assumptions is rightly identified, that our sensory experience can at least be accurate. So that I think that's a very important a priori assumption there. Now, you then go on to talk about what you call evidence, and in particular you talk about physical evidence. Now, I think this is perhaps the point at which I think I would diverge here. Because before you can have physical evidence, you actually have as an a priori, you have experiencing. And experiencing is at the heart of our belief in both an inner world, which we can experience particularly when we bring awareness into our bodies, and also our beliefs concerning the world in which we live. Interestingly, Einstein and others said something like, concerning the outside world, he said something like this: logic of itself cannot tell us anything about the world in which we live. Everything starts with experience and ends with experience. Now, you were talking about physical evidence and checking out, if you like, physical evidence. I'd want to go one step beyond that, or behind that, and talk about our experience, our experiencing of the outside world. Evidence is, I would argue, experiencing. If you remove experiencing, then you can have no evidence. Evidence is experiencing, and scientific evidence, for example, which is not equivalent to evidence, but it's a scientific type of evidence, is experiencing that is particularly codified in a particular way, and it's experiencing that is repeatable. In other words, we can use a scientific methodology in order to test out a particular hypothesis, and we do so through experiments, through controlled experiments and repeatable experiences. I think that's very important. So I'd want to say experiencing is an essential prerequisite for our belief in evidence, and that evidence is our experiencing, and that scientific evidence is a particularly codified way, or experiencing that has been codified and is testable in a particular way. So I think that that's one of the points I'd like to make. Just to quote or to go back to Descartes in 2 + 3 = 5, I think there's an interesting side issue that I'd like to make, and that is about the nature of the relationship between experiencing and language. Now, babies all start off with experiencing, and that's very important. Hold on. Okay. And one of the ways in which we grow as children is that we have a capacity to take language on the one hand and experiencing on the other, and to mesh those two things. So, for example, we have the experiencing of hunger, which babies express through crying and through what we call rage if it doesn't get fulfilled. Later on, they match the word hunger to experiencing in order to produce conceptual meaning. Now, I think that this to me is again something that I feel at least is very important before we get to what you call physical evidence. Now, in terms of 2 + 2 = 5, if I can guess what Descartes meant. Now, I can't do all the fancy gizmos that you can do. I don't know how to do that, but I can illustrate it. If we have a different framework of language, then in fact 2 + 2 can actually equal something other than 5. Let me give you an example. Supposing we had a number framework which had 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, on that particular framework, 2 + 3 would equal this. That's the experience of it. But it would be 1, 2, 3, 5, 4. Now, that may sound a little trivial. There is a serious point to it. The serious point is that we have experiencing and we have intellectual frameworks within which we enfold and experience and carry forward that experience. So, for example, this plus this always equals this as an experience, but in our conventional framework, this is called 5, and in our non-conventional framework, this experience would be called 4. So there is a definite interaction, therefore, between language and experience. If you remove experience from language, language becomes literally meaningless and without significance. Now, the evidence that we have is evidence, all evidence, all experiencing is in a sense subjective. And what I mean by that is our inner experiences are subjectively experienced. I am aware, therefore I am. Our experiencing of the world in which we live is subjectively experienced. And we have sufficient commonality in terms of our brain structures with and with other human beings to be able to communicate our experiencing, and the experiencing of many individuals has sufficient commonality for us to be able to develop hypotheses about the world and indeed the nature of the world in which we live. So I would question this idea of cognitive. No, that's not what you call it. Sorry, this idea of physical evidence. Physical evidence is a conceptualization of experiencing of the world in which a priori we take to exist. So physical evidence is experiencing, actually. And experiencing can be both external, of external things, and experiencing can also be in an inner dimensional, of an inner dimension. There is a very interesting saying, for example, a couple of sayings from a religious perspective. There's a Sufi saying, which is that the body is the shore to the ocean of being, that when we go inwards into the body, we actually get transported into another dimension. And another one from the Old Testament, which is God has put eternity into the hearts of man. And certainly, again, in terms of the inner aspect of experiencing, we have experiences that that can be explained in terms of accessing another dimension. It is the argument, perhaps the crux of the argument will be around of the nature of that dimension and how we understand it and what the reality is behind it. So I think that is the point I'd be making. To extend Einstein's quote, we cannot know anything about the nature of the world we live in through logic alone. Everything starts with experiencing and ends with experience. We also cannot know anything about the nature of our inner world apart from experiencing. That's the first point. So experiencing has an inner and an outer quality. And the second point is indeed that experiencing is at the very heart of meaning in language, and that we can conceptualize our experiencing in different ways, and also that when we do conceptualize that in different ways, the experiential base can be identical. And to go back to Descartes' example, this plus this equals this. But conceptually, we may go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 5, 4. We have to look, now they're both perfectly valid within their own framework, within their own systems. As long as we all agreed that this equals 4, then there would be no confusion. So conceptual frameworks are, in a way, dependent upon experiencing and can indeed be changed. And as long as we're all agreed on that, then there isn't a problem with that. And that experiencing has an outer and an inner dimension. I completely agree with you on a scientific methodology for exploring the outer dimension, but I would query your use of, as I say, physical evidence. Physical evidence is a conceptualization of experiencing of the outer world, which a priori we assume exists, and which we also are a part and also have an effect on it. Now, I'm not quite sure where your videos are going, but I'm hoping that this is an intelligent contribution to the debate. Many thanks. Bye.